Sorry. Sorry, I wasn't ready for that. Okay, so my name is Joseph Jordan. I'm going to be your teacher today. We're going to be looking at ways in which we can learn vocabulary and the best ways that we can learn vocabulary. Wait a minute. If you could just wait a second. Okay, let's try that again. My name's Joseph Jordan, and today we're going to be looking at vocabulary and ways in which we can learn vocabulary. Now, if you look at the list on the board on your screen at the moment, this is basically the typical way students learn vocabulary. We learn long lists of vocabulary. We may even have vocabulary books. And once in a while, we take these vocabulary books out, we study the vocabulary, and we feel good about ourselves. The problem with this approach is that we can spend an incredible amount of time focusing on this vocabulary to no real effect. It takes time. If we learn, let's say, 100 words, 200 words, or 300 words, or let's say 1,000 words, if we learn 1,000 words, and it takes us approximately 4 weeks to do so, it takes a lot of time to actually learn that vocabulary. But when it comes to remembering over a long period of time, it's really not an effective way because we find that we start to lose the vocabulary that we've spent so much time learning. So today we're going to be looking at other ways that we can approach vocabulary, mainly through word parts. So let's go to word parts. We have everybody there. Okay. Hi everybody. Hold up. I'm just going to say hi. Okay. I'm not able to communicate with you during it, but I will occasionally look at the chats as we're going through the lesson. So with word parts, when we look at vocabulary, a word can be broken down into 3 basic parts. And the knowledge of these parts will actually help you understand not only the meaning of that word, but also how we can use that word in a sentence grammatically. And sometimes this is without actually the need to use a dictionary. And this is basically what a lot of native speakers do when they see a new word. We don't always have a dictionary at hand. So what we do instead is we look at the word and we break that word down into parts and we compare it with other words that we already know. And we try to guess the meaning of that word. Of course, it's not always enough, but if we look at that word within a sentence, we get a better understanding as to what that word can mean. So let's go to the next slide. For example, if we look at the word disruptive, I'm going to give everybody a little while to look at that word and see if they can break it down. We can actually break it down into 3 distinct parts, 3 separate parts. So I'm going to give you, I don't know, maybe 20, maybe 30 seconds to actually look at that word and see if you can come up with the 3 parts that word is made up of. Please feel free to put those answers into the message column. And I'll just wait here. Okay, well, don't seem to have any answers at the moment, so we'll go through it by ourselves together. To begin with, we have what's called a prefix, and the prefix here is dis. We'll be putting that up on the board very shortly. Then we have the root or the stem, and in this case it's rubbed. Again, we'll talk about root or stems later on today. And then we have this suffix, if. And all of these parts are basically telling me a lot of information about this word. The prefix dis is telling me that this word may be negative. The root or stem is also giving me a meaning, the main meaning of that word. And the suffix if is actually telling me how to use that word, how I should use that word in a sentence. Let's have a look at an example. We'll go down here. We'll build up on those. So with this, we have, I don't know, if we think of some other examples, dislike, for example. We have disinterested. We have disabled. We also have displeased. We also have disagreeable. And all of these words, as you can see, they're joined by the same prefix, dis. And I'll just highlight on the board for you. I think we get the main idea. We'll put that one down there as well. And of course, we've got dis and disagreeable too. Now, we'll be looking at this a little bit later when we start to look at negative prefixes. But this basically, let's get rid of the camera. But this basically gives it a slight negative meaning. Not precisely negative, we'll discuss as to how it makes a word, or what words it makes negative a little bit later. But one of its meanings is to show negation. Of course, we also have the root, rupt, and root means to break. And I'll give you some examples of that word. We have corrupt. We have disrupt. We also have erupt. And we have rupture too. Whoops, put that wrong way around. Rupture. Oops, sorry. Rupture. Then we also have the suffix. Some other examples here, supportive, for example. We have productive. Productive, we have negative. And we also have active. And of course here, the suffix that we're using is if. I'll come back to that very shortly. As I said earlier, we'll be looking at this like a little bit later, so I'm not going to talk about this too much. But we can go down here to what we call the root or the stem. And for me, rupt actually, it means to break in terms of meaning, and to corrupt something means to break a perfect system, to make it less worthy than it already is. For example, corrupt police or a corrupt politician. We have this word to disrupt, which also very similar to the word interrupt, meaning to stop or to break the process of something from happening. We have erupt that we use for volcanoes. A volcano may erupt. And we also have rupture, which means a simple break. Down here we have the suffix. We have the suffix, and this suffix is basically telling me that this word is an adjective, and it's telling me how I should use that word. The basic meaning of this suffix, even though suffixes don't have an overall general meaning, they do lend a particular idea to that meaning. And if in one of its meanings means to tend to do something, or I don't know, what else can we say? Tend to, maybe likely to do something. Likely to do something. So if someone is supportive, they are likely to support someone. If someone is productive, we have this to produce, product, to produce. If someone is productive, then they are likely to produce. If someone is negative, then they are likely to be slightly on the negative side. And with active, action, if someone is active, then they are likely to do things as opposed to not do things and just sit around all day, pretty much what we're doing at the moment with this corona pandemic. Let's go back to the slide. So this and rupt have given me some very important information as to the main meaning of this word. If, as a suffix, is basically telling me what type of word it is I'm dealing with. If we quickly go back down to maybe an example of if we go down and have a quick look at an example of supportive of if in a sentence, we can actually see that he is a very supportive. I'm sorry, I'm very, very nervous at the moment. He is very supportive. Here we can see that he is a very supportive friend. And as we can see here, supportive is being used before the noun. Just here, and I'll highlight that. The noun form. That's one way in which we can use this adjective. Another way we can use this is just simply by saying he, whoops, let's get rid of that, by saying that he is supportive. And here we have a second type of adjective in which we're using it after, after the auxiliary verb am, is, are. We can also use it after the past auxiliary verb was, were, and we can also use it after been, as in the perfect tenses. So we could easily say he is supportive, but we could also say that she or he was supportive in the past, but they are no longer supportive. We can use it also maybe in a continuous tense, such as he is being supportive. The continuous tense there, of course, shows that this action is temporary. We could also use it in maybe a perfect tense. He has been very supportive of my project until now. Let's go back to the slides. So we're going to begin today's lesson by looking at prefixes. And we need to think about what prefixes actually do. Well, a prefix, for example, modifies the root or stem that it's attached to. And what I mean by modifier, I don't necessarily mean to change or to change the meaning directly. It means to add a meaning. So the root or stem maintains the original meaning, as in rupt, meaning to break, and the prefix that we use, this, adds an extra meaning to that root or stem. Generally, we find prefixes at the start of a word, but we need to remember that two or more prefixes may be used when modifying a stem or a root. Let's look at an example. Okay, we can look at the word reincarnation, a word which in Turkish is exactly the same, reincarnation. In Turkish, it comes from the French language. In English, we got it directly from the Latin language. And here we have two prefixes being used. Can anybody guess which prefixes we're using? The two prefixes that we're using here are re, and we'll come back to re very shortly. Very good, Sumia. There's a slight lag on this YouTube, so I'm getting your messages a little bit later. But yeah, we have re, and re is an important prefix. Here, re actually means again. I'll give you some more examples very shortly. And we have the second prefix, in. Let's have a look at some examples of those. Reincarnation, we'll put that down here. Reincarnation. Now, re here, re actually has many different meanings. Very good, Mustafa. Okay, I've just got your message. Thank you very much, Fati. Thank you very much, Fati. we have re, which here in this sense means again. And we have some other examples such as redo, rewrite, or maybe even retell. Redo, of course, means to do again. Rewrite means to write again. And retell means to tell again. That's not the only meaning that re has. It has a second meaning too. But we'll be looking at that second meaning a little bit later on today. We have this prefix in, again. And just to give you a quick clue, you'll need to know this for the second half of the lesson today. It means into. I'm not going to write any examples because we'll be looking at it later in the lesson today. But we can go down to the root kan. Does anybody know the meaning of the word kan? I'll give you a couple of seconds there. Yes, Nevin, recycle is a very good example of re meaning again. Very good, Fatih. That's correct. Okay, kan means flesh or meat. And we can see it in a number of words, such as carnivore, someone that eats, or an animal that eats flesh. We'll go back to the slide. So then we have reincarnation. We also have this suffix here, ation, which I forgot about. We can put that down here, ation. Oops. Ation. And we use that to show processes, the process of something. So we have words like production, the process of production, illumination, the process of illuminating, education, again, noun form, the process of educating. And here, of course, we use this for nouns. Let's return back to the slides. So there we have it. Sometimes prefixes modify the meaning of a root. In this case, the root or stem here is kan, but it's possible also to have more than one prefix in a sentence, in any given word. So in terms of structure, there are two types of prefix. We have those which are attachable, which means we can add them and take them away from the root of stem without that root of stem losing its meaning. For example, if we have a look at the word, let's say, unhappy. Unhappy here is, well, it's made up again of three parts. Can anybody tell me what the prefix is? Well, the prefix is actually an unhappy child, for example. But the thing is with we can quite easily take it away from that stem and it still has a meaning by itself. We can say that a child is happy, or we can say a child is unhappy. It really doesn't matter. However, if we look at another word, an example of a fixed prefix, this type of prefix cannot be taken away from the root of stem. If we take it away from the root of stem, it simply has no meaning. Let's have a look at an example. Provide. Now, provide consists of two main parts. Can anybody tell me what the prefix is? Okay, the prefix is pro. I've just had to reload your screen so I can follow your chats. They seem to be disappearing. I was hoping to be able to communicate with you more. The chats, there we go. The chats have come up. There we go. Oh, I'm on chat. There we go. Pro. Very good, Fatih. Very good, Nevin. Hi. I'm now on chat. Up and working. The prefix is actually pro. We'll be looking as to what pro means a little bit later, but with this type of prefix, the problem is if we take it away from that word or that stem, it no longer has a meaning by itself. And this type of prefix is actually very, very common. So here's a chance for you to actually practice your skills. There's a list of words on the board. What I'd like you to do, I'm going to give you maybe 1 minute to have a look through those. See if you can guess what the prefixes are in each of those words. I'll give you, let's say, 30 seconds to a minute. Okay, something about the sound. There is no sound. Okay. Microphone. I've pretty much got everything up as high as I can. I'll try to speak a little bit louder. I'll come closer to the computer. If there's no sound at the moment, that's because I've given everybody a small chance to actually look at the screen. Okay, so with dislike, can anybody tell me what the prefix is? Okay, the prefix is actually dis. And then in unicycle, please feel free, as I'm reading through these, to repeat them for some pronunciation practice. Then down here we have unicycle. Can you tell me the prefix for the prefix in this one? Very good, Sumia. This was correct. This was correct. Thank you, Irina. What about for unicycle? Not unfortunately. You're very, very close though. The prefix is uni. And we'll come back to that prefix a little bit later on today. What about the next one? Foretell. Any clues? Yeah, that's correct. Yep, uni. And then in foretell, we have for. And in the next one, transatlantic, we have trans. Very good, Sumia. That's correct. Very good, Sevda. And then in import, can anybody tell me the one for import? The next one for import is im. Then going to the next column, we have illegible. And the prefix there is il. And then for bi-monthly, very good, Sumya, that's correct. For bi-monthly, we have bi. And we'll come back to that a little bit later too. And then in the next one, we have un, as in unpopular. We'll come back that too. Very good, Sumya. Remember that because we'll be doing that very shortly. And then in the next one, postgraduate, we have post. And then we have contract. And the one in contract is con. We'll come back to that later too. Then in subway, we have the prefix sub. And then we have the prefix tri in tricycle. Just a quick point, it's not tricycle, it's tricycle, both in British English and American English. Sometimes these prefixes do change, as we'll see a little bit later on today. Then in the next one we have ir, as in irregular. Notice that I don't pronounce the R's. English is a non-rhotic language, so it's not irregular, as we would say maybe in Turkish. It's actually irregular, a very, very soft R sound. Then in the next one we have pre, as in pre-intermediate. And then we have indecisive is the way we pronounce that word. And then in the far right corner we have im, as in imperfect. And then the word below we have reverse, and the prefix there is re, of course. And then we have the word below that, export, and the prefix there is x. I'm going to just stop a minute, having a quick look at your chats, and you're all doing remarkably well. Hello, Edger, how are you? Thank you for your participation. And then we have decrease, and the prefix there is actually d, as in decrease. And then finally we have pro-democracy, and pro is our prefix there. And a quick note on these ones here, when we look at the words postgraduate, pre-intermediate, and pre-democracy, between these we're using a hyphen to separate the two parts. If we look at the other ones here, for example, such as dislike, unicycle, foretell, transatlantic, and import, we don't have this hyphen being used. And the reason that we use this hyphen to separate this prefix from this word is because the nature of this word, graduate is actually a proper noun. It's a noun form. So if we look at unpopular, popular is an adjective form. So we don't need to use that hyphen. If we look at bi-monthly, again, monthly, ly, it's an adverbial form. So we don't need to use that hyphen there either. Then we've got illegible, bull, is something that we use to create adjectives. It's a suffix that we use to create adjectives. And again, we don't have that hyphen there. But if we look at intermediate, for example, as many of you already know, intermediate is a noun form. So we must use that hyphen there to separate these two. Again, if we look at democracy down here in the bottom corner, again, it's a noun form. We know that because we have this Y ending here. And we are using this hyphen for exactly the same reason. We have the prefix, hyphen, and then we have the noun form. So let's have a look at those again. I'm going to give everybody maybe, I don't know, the internet seems to be very slow. I'm getting your information maybe 10, maybe 15 seconds after you're writing your messages. So have a look at that list. There are 6 negative prefixes. Could you please tell me what those negative prefixes are? You don't need to write the long form, you can just write the prefix in the comment section. In the meantime, if anybody's just joined watching this live broadcast, my name is Joseph Jordan. I'm a teacher at the Kadıköy branch in Istanbul. I'm working from home. I'm sure as many of you are. I hope everybody's safe and enjoying the time that they have at the moment. It's not often we get to spend so much time by ourselves or with people that we love. There we go, Sumia. Yep, very good. We've got dis, il, ir, in, not D. D is not negative, no. Almost. Yep, we've got on. So dis, il, ir, in, and on. And one more, I think, there we go. Hello, Selenai. We have im, which would actually give us our final negative prefix. So we have dislike, illegible, unpopular, irregular, indecisive, and imperfect. So I'm going to put up on the screen. We'll come back to the meaning of these words a little bit later. I'm going to put up on the screen some basic rules that we have with the use of these basic prefixes. Now, when I say rules, there's no hard rules. Of course, with every rule, there's an exception. The two most difficult to use would be dis in the first line there. Okay, they all mean not to some degree, but this is slightly different because it has this idea of being away from. It's a little bit different from, I don't know, not liking something. If we look at examples such as dislike, I could say I don't like football, or I could say I dislike football. And although they're very similar in meaning, they are slightly different. When I say I don't like football, this is just a general statement, my general opinion or feeling towards that sport. But if I said I dislike football, there's an idea of me actually not really liking it. It's a little bit stronger than not like. When my friends say, hey, let's play football, I decide to stay away from them and go in the opposite direction. We'll have another look at an example or something like that a little bit later. If we go down to un at the very bottom there, un, okay, it also means something negative, but it also means to do the opposite or to take something away. We often use un to make adjectives from adjectives or to make nouns negative, but we often use it as well when we look at participles, past participle. In Turkish, you say üçüncü hali. And an example of that here would be un, as in unknown. Un here at the bottom is the past participle of know. So what about im, il, ir, and in? Well, they basically all have the same meaning. In fact, they are the same prefix. The way we use these prefixes really depends on the first letter of the root or stem that we want to connect them to. Let's have a look at im, for example. Im is used with words that start with the letter B, M, P. These sounds we call bilabial sounds. Say those words: b, m, p. You'll probably notice that all of those sounds come from the two front lips that we have, and we just add a small sound at the back of our throat. B, m, p. An example of this would be impossible. And there you go. We have an example of that bilabial. Now, these are general rules. It's not always going to be that way, of course. But, 9 times out of 10, it's going to help you use these words when you need to. Now, il is slightly different because il we use with words that begin with L. And an example here would be illegitimate. Illegitimate basically means illegal or something which is not recognized by law. And there we go, we can see that this word begins with L. Moving on to ir. Here, of course, we use generally with words that begin with R. And an example of that would be regular. Of course, it would be irregular. In, well, they're the other sounds. If it's not B, if it's not M, if it's not P, if it's not L, if it's not R, then it's going to be in. Maybe the D in decisive or definitely. And there we go, indefinitely. Irritating is a fantastic example, Sumia. I hope you're not talking about my presentation. So let's move on. Here I'm going to give you another chance to have a look at these words. I'm going to give you maybe just a minute or two. I know it's not a very long period of time. But have a look at those words and see if you can guess which negative prefix we have to use with those words. And then we'll discuss them a little bit after. Very good. Inconvenient, immortal, unattractive, irreversible, impolite, illegal. We're doing very, very well. Disown, excellent. Illiterate, irrational, doing very, very well. Sumia, you're doing excellent. Look at you go, illogical. Wow. You're like the prefix queen. Very good. You're doing very, very well. Boom. Unfriendly. Okay, well, let's have a quick look through these. Try and get as much of this done before the first break in about 4 minutes. We'll continue after the lesson. After the break time, we'll also be looking at roots. But of course, in the first one, we have inconvenient. If something is inconvenient, then it causes a problem or causes a troublesome situation. Then we have down here insignificant. Significant means important. Insignificant, of course, means not important. Mortal, well, mortare means death. If someone is mortal, then they are likely to die. Vampires and other mythological creatures are considered to be immortal in the sense that they live forever. And I think we have attractive and Sumia, a number of you actually were correct. We have unattractive. I don't think I need to explain that word in much detail. But if we come back down here, this root, tract, we'll be coming back to this later on, maybe today or maybe next week. We do have another prefix here, actually, a, which means to or towards. In the next one, we have irreversible, of course, because the word begins with an R. And ible is a suffix that we use to show ability. So we have reversible, something which can be reversed. Irreversible, something which cannot be reversed. And then up the top we have polite and impolite. Of course, we have that bilabial P sound made with our lips. Then we have own. Did we have anything for own? Well, own was disown. And again, this idea of dis being far away from. When you own something, you want to keep it very close to you. When you disown something, you want it to be very far away from you. To disown your child or to disown your family means to distance them and push them as far away as possible. Down here, literate, of course, begins with an L. So we have illiterate. Literate, someone who is able to read and write. Illiterate, someone who is unable to read or write. Down here we have rational. Can you hear the pronunciation of that ul sound? It's ul. Rational, not rational or rational, rational. Actually, down here it's the same as well. It's not logical, it's logical, like the Turkish sound. That sound we also have up here as well. Inconvenient, not inconvenient is the correct pronunciation. Here, insignificant is not the correct pronunciation. Instead, we should say insignificant. Here we got that same prefix, we got that same suffix or, immortal. Here again, we've got that same sound, irreversible. We've got that sound. Let's go back to rational. It begins with an R, so of course it's irrational. And then logical begins with an L, so of course it's illogical. And legal, for the same reason, we have illegal. Perfect, it's a bilabial, m, p, b, so we know it should be imperfect. Responsible, as many of you have already guessed, it begins with an R, so it's irresponsible. Friendly, well, we have unfriendly, and interesting, we have uninteresting. So let's continue to the next one. So I'll probably be going for a break very, very shortly, but before we go on a break, let's have a quick introduction to the second family in terms of meaning where prefixes are concerned, and they are prefixes which show direction, not negation as we've seen before, but they show how something moves. Sometimes a prefix may be able to show that something is moving or going in a forward direction. Maybe that prefix is showing that an action is going in a downward motion. Maybe that prefix is also showing that two things are working together or working with each other. Some prefixes are used to show that an action is going backward. Some show that an action or a particular action is going out of somewhere, such as out of a country. Sometimes that prefix may also show that an action is happening or taking place below what we can see. And sometimes a prefix may be used to show that an action is going into something, such as into a country. So we're going to take a short break here. We'll take a very short break, and I'll be back, I believe, at 3 o'clock. Okay? I'll see you soon.